New York and on the new Hot 97 app. Ebro in the morning on Hot 97.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Ebro in the morning. Laura Stiles, Rosenberg, and hopefully I get your name right. Running for Brooklyn District Attorney, Dwimoh.
You got it.
Yes,
Hey,
give it up.
Thank you.
I'm clapping for Ebro getting your name right because he struggles.
I'll forget your name while you're sitting here the whole time. We were fortunate enough to have Ken Thompson on when he was running for Brooklyn DA. And fortunately, we recognized at the time that the Brooklyn DA, I forget the old guy's name that was running that borough at the time before Ken Thompson was in, was not a good guy. Maybe good to some, but not good to many. Put a lot of people away for crimes they didn't commit, and we recognized that Ken Thompson was going in to rectify old Brooklyn problems.
Absolutely.
And then we lost Ken Thompson.
Yes.
And so now you've been serving as special counsel to Eric Adams.
Yes, the borough president of Brooklyn.
Okay, but the sitting district attorney has been whom?
The acting district attorney is a man named Eric Gonzalez.
And why is he not the answer? Let me ask you that first.
Okay, well, let me just break it down to you. 4 years ago, I was the only one who was sitting right next to Ken and carving out his vision in terms of being the next Brooklyn district attorney. Everyone who's running for district attorney, they were all still a part of the Hines regime, and they all were working towards keeping him elected. So it is
even
important.
this Gonzalez character.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm the only one who sat and stood before Ken. I mean, listen, back then, 4 years ago, we knew Brooklyn needed a change. Hines had been in operation for over 2 decades, and a lot of things. There was some good, but then there was a lot of bad. And so with Ken, we knew that he was our new vision in terms of what we had to do for Brooklyn. Sadly enough, no one would have expected him to die so early, and that was just a shocker. But it happened, and we need to move forward in this and in this vein. So it's because of my great respect for Ken and also my career. I was a prosecutor there for 21 years.
So when we look up your resume and your prosecution resume, what would you say that we would see from Dwimoh?
Yeah.
Who are you?
Who am I? Well, I've been the voice for the voiceless. I've worked on behalf of children in Brooklyn. I created the first Crimes Against Children Bureau in New York State, and that impacted the lives of children under the age of 11 who were victims of crime, sex abuse, physical abuse, and homicides and fatalities. Now, one of the biggest cases, maybe everyone will remember this, and this goes a couple years back, and that's of a little girl. She was 7 years old. Her name was Nix Mary Brown. And Nix Mary Brown was killed by her mother and stepfather. She was tied and bound to a radiator in a chair.
I remember this.
She was forced to use a litter box. She was underweight. She weighed about 26 pounds, 27 pounds. She was 7 years old. But it was a horrific crime. A 7-year-old who actually just lived 1 block away from the 7-9 precinct. So it just really showed us that, you can be so close to a police precinct and to safety, but yet so far away for children. But that case, it just didn't impact the criminal justice system. It impacted the way ACS, the Administrations for Children's Services, as well as the Board of Education handled the cases. So she stands for, in her life and how she died, really impacted how children are handled in the system.
Let's have some real progressive talk.
Okay.
Where is Dwimoh at with marijuana and legalization or decriminalization, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with marijuana. The bottom line is when we sat around the table with Ken, we identified, the importance of not prosecuting under 25 milligrams of marijuana. And that was a great first step. When it comes to crimes and what's impacting our community, I don't think marijuana is on top of the list, And you have to remember, those arrests, they impact differently in black and brown neighborhoods because, newsflash, a lot of people are smoking marijuana, not just black and brown folk.
You don't say.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Now let's talk about guns.
Yeah.
Brooklyn is one of the more notorious boroughs when it comes to gun violence in the city. We're looking at I think record lows with shootings. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's what they say. Everyone keeps saying crime is down in Brooklyn. If you look from decades, crime is down. But when you go to neighborhoods in the community,
specific neighborhoods,
you go to brown and black neighborhoods. You go to Brownsville. You go to East New York. You ask the community is crime down? They'll tell you, no, it's not. It's still there. And I get worried when people start talking that language that crime is down, because that means then resources may not be available to the community, and that matters. So when it comes to guns, you know, I have a strict policy against guns. You know, all I know is this. I've attended too many funerals, and I've seen too many mothers and families crying over their sons and daughters killed due to gun violence. We got to get these guns out of our neighborhoods. But the issue is we need help from the federal government. See, that is about the gun trafficking coming up Route 95, up north, right into Brooklyn. And that's a problem.
From Virginia, from the Carolinas, where it's very easy to get guns.
Absolutely.
So how do you propose tackling that?
Well, I want to have a message in terms of local message for the community. I do believe in mandatory minimums when it comes to guns. I'm the only candidate who says that. You talk a lot about reform and being progressive, but you also have to remind people that we have to have safety. And I do care about gun violence. I care about the youth, and I care about them getting their hands on the guns. But the question I do, before I even talk about mandatory minimums, I call it proactive justice. I'm talking about prevention. We got to identify why our young people are getting these guns in the first place. Now, a lot of that might have to do with not having access to programs, not having access to alternatives in order to go forward in their young lives.
Because it's just at some ages, it's just mischief. And if the mischief of your neighborhood is a lot of people carrying guns and playing around with guns and acting tough and being in gangs, a lot of young people sign up for that.
Well, I think we had a lot of conversation the last year during the presidential campaign, about the Hillary Clinton predators line. And so we ended up having a lot of conversations about kids and violence. And it's a very fine line, because you want to be progressive in how you view the law, and you don't want to punish children at such a young age that they never have the right to get on the right track.
That's right.
At the same time, I do get frustrated when people sort of blanket say, like, these are babies. And you're like, well, some people are 16-year-old kids making really bad decisions and playing with guns who need to be punished also.
Well, and they know what they're doing.
And they know what they're doing. They're not babies.
But you see, I think it's important that we speak to the young people in a way that they get it. So we're talking about prevention, but there are also a lot of groups like Stop the Violence and Man Up. They're groups that actually are people who are filled with young people who can talk to young people. Right now, unfortunately, I have an intergenerational gap between me and the young people. So I don't want to talk at people. I want to have a discussion with them, because that becomes really important. So when I think of things like, sitting with me right now is a man named Chewbacca Shakur, and he's been a great inspiration to me. He was a member of the wrongfully convicted community. He was wrongfully convicted from the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office, where he served over double digits of time for a crime he didn't occur. Now, this is real, and this is what I want the community to all understand. Coming out of Brooklyn, there have been 23 wrongful conviction cases. And the list is growing, so we're not going to rest right there.
Over how long?
Over a couple decades. But
which was the Hines regime, which Ken was trying to clean up, which you're saying Gonzalez is just going to do more of what Hines was doing.
Well, you know what? I just don't know if Gonzalez has the ability to do what needs to be done. And I'll just tell you this, like this. What I propose is to create an independent commission working with people who are outside of the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office, not someone else appoints who's from the District Attorney's Office, but a separate group of people who are going to review the conduct of the lawyers and the cops involved in those cases. Because what happens is this. These cases have been identified. Ken started a great unit, the Conviction Review Unit. It's fantastic. It identified cases that where people are going to be wrongfully convicted, who are exonerated. What I want to do is take it a step further. It's not good enough for me that someone is just exonerated and they will get some money from the city. That's great, all well and good.
But what about the individuals?
There you go. Now you're talking.
Right.
So this is all about holding people accountable, holding the system accountable. We can't be afraid of that. But you see, interesting enough, some of those prosecutors could still be at the DA's office. Some of those prosecutors may have gone on, become judges, working in these fat law firms. So if we can't hold the system...
Some of the police officers are still working.
There you go.
That's right.
There you go.
And I know this has nothing to do with you and not to cut you off, but
no.
in the Bronx right now we're watching, is it the 49th precinct?
42nd?
Is it the 42nd precinct?
42nd.
What's going on with David Terrell and that whole
Yes, and Pedro Hernandez.
uncovering of what they were doing to young men whose moms didn't want to date the guy, and then the guy along with his cohorts were
Yeah.
putting charges against these little boys, snatch them out of their bed, put little convictions on their record and things like that.
See, I'm hoping that when people begin to understand that there's going to be an independent commission who's going to review your work, no matter how many years later, because I think that when it comes to justice, we can't be in a situation where we're going to say, oh, well, there's a statute of limitations. At a base minimum, the community deserves to know exactly what happened, and people have got to be held accountable. It's that simple, and it has to be transparent. If we do that, then we're A, going to learn from really learn what happened and how do we prevent it, and B, we're holding people accountable. I just can't believe that as prosecutors, that anyone, especially the sitting DA, has not held anyone accountable for the 23 wrongful convictions. That makes me concerned. And what I'll tell you this, he's no Ken Thompson. Understand me?
Right.
You know, and Ken has some big shoes, he has some big shoes to fill with Ken. But you've got to be courageous, and you've got to feel it. You've got to understand that, these men and women who have been wrongfully convicted, that's our worst nightmare. That's what goes against what we believe in the criminal justice system. And that's about justice. And that's why I keep talking that justice matters, because it impacts our life every single day.
So I've speculated many times on the air. And I make no qualms about the fact that I just sometimes come with conspiracy theories that are baseless, but it sounds good. As we watch our city change,
yes,
neighborhoods change,
yes,
coincidence, this 42nd precinct, is that what it is?
Right.
South Bronx. People that developed Williamsburg want that real estate. What's going on even in East New York and some of those precincts. There is a lot of crime in these areas. I'm not saying that's not the case. But there also is a lot of desire for that real estate.
Absolutely.
And it just sometimes seems that the right on time when real estate becomes valuable, the young people in the neighborhood, I'm not saying are good people, but just how the community is dealt with in either getting kids programs so that they can stay out of trouble young, providing resources at schools, great schools, is kind of like, we don't need to do that over there because we need that land anyway and we need them out of there.
So when you hear messaging like crime is down, crime is low, that's what makes me worry. Because there's still people in the community who will say it's not so, but I'm concerned about the services and the programs that are cut for our young people.
Because they do want those people gone.
Of course. I mean, listen, I'm happy to see Brooklyn grow. Brooklyn has grown, and it's changing so quickly, and it's amazing. We welcome to Brooklyn, but we also have longstanding residents and communities in Brooklyn that deserve to be there, and they deserve to have their justice. What I don't want to see a quote-unquote wall built around communities like East New York and Brownsville, and then people just walk away and forget about them because they don't have a voice, because they're not actively engaged sometimes politically. Sometimes when you're a single mom and you got 3 jobs or 2 jobs and 5 kids and you got a lot of other stuff going on in your life, you cannot be as engaged as you want to be. So that is why elected leadership in Brooklyn, it matters. And it matters that people are engaged and they understand what people are saying. So when I'm out in the community, sometimes people say to me, oh, okay, well, what are you going to do for me? And I get that because that's real. That's a real question, and then, but we have to engage in a conversation because what I've seen a lot of people who are broken right now. People are hurting, and it does matter, and I see the same issues I saw 20 years ago as a young prosecutor impacting these communities are still there. I got young brothers out there who don't believe that their life is worth living, that they are 19 years old and they kill somebody and then they'll say, well, you know what? What am I supposed to live for? And that's a real story that happened to me 20-something years ago. And when I'm out there with the youth now, they're still echoing the same thing. So that tells me that we're not progressing the way we need to.
Nobody cares about us. Why should we care about anybody else?
Yeah, that's real.
Dwimoh is her name, running for. And when do people vote, district attorney? When does this happen? And how does it happen?
All right, September 12th is the Democratic primary. And this is the thing. People often talk about that this is going to be a low turnout, but it can't be a low turnout. We need the community to come forward, and we need them to vote, because who becomes the next Brooklyn District Attorney is going to impact the next generation of black and brown kids, young people, okay? And that is real. And what's real about this is that the criminal justice system impacts our lives far more on a daily basis than any other group. And we need to be at the table, and you need to have someone who's compassionate, who understands it, and who has been there in the community, because it matters. Justice has to matter for us. And we have to understand, if we don't do this for us, who will?
Nobody.
Okay, now.
Then they're going to lock your kids up.
Yeah.
and they gonna lock you up. We talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
You don't want to get involved. They got cages and things for us already.
That's right.
I don't know if is there anything else we should cover, guys, before she gets out of here?
Didn't you want to introduce us to someone else too?
I sure do. Yes. And this is Chewbacca Shakur.
The aforementioned
So you can
Chewbacca.
slide- yeah,
Yes, yes.
Slide on over. Bring your
slide
chair over.
over.
Oh, there
Sorry.
you go.
Yeah, there
And
you
this,
go.
and you know, he represents to me why it's important that we have a new Brooklyn district attorney who understands and gets it. Chewbacca, tell me your story.
My name is Chewbacca Shakur. I did 27 and a half years for a crime I didn't commit. I had 2 murder charges that I was convicted of. I know that I take a personal stake in this because I know other people who are innocent who are in prison, right? The district attorney's office, in my case, has not held the officer accountable. And this same officer is the common denominator in 12 of those 23 convictions that have been overturned. That's not a coincidence.
And that's like
You know
the
what
guy
I'm
that we're watching up in
Terrell.
Yeah.
with David
Yeah.
Terrell.
Absolutely. I mean, we got crooked cops, you know what I'm saying? And that's a fact. But they're putting people in jail for decades. And they're not being held accountable. These guys retired, they're still on city pension, making money from the city. And people's lives have been impacted. You know, not only the individual that's incarcerated, but the families. You know, children are being
course.
raised without no fathers, without no mothers, because their mothers or fathers are in prison for something they didn't do. Family members. My mother passed away before I ever got a chance to come home and see her. You know, so this is like a personal thing that we have to take because it's happening, like she said, to Black and Latino people. That's who it's happening to. You know what I'm saying? And the district attorney is right now has an opportunity to hold people accountable, and they're not. This is why he's not Ken Thompson. Ken Thompson did what he did, and he changed the landscape in the
And
criminal
you
justice
say
system.
who's not?
Eric Gonzalez.
Gonzalez.
He's not.
The
You
acting
know what I'm
DA,
saying?
okay.
Because, like, Alma and them are looking to be the DA. So we have to wait to see. He's there now. He can act right now.
He's been there. It's been the last 18 months, 2 years.
No, he's been there. He's been there all the while. He was in the Hines administration, and then he stayed over, even though he voted for Hines. I don't know if he voted, but he worked on Hines and helped him keep him in office. And then now he's there, and he was Ken's number 2 person. But he's no Ken Thompson, and you know, and that's really what you're driving at, because he's had opportunity with these wrongful conviction cases to hold people accountable. I mean, and just
Why? So why would you say he's passed on those opportunities?
because it hasn't happened.
But why do you think he's doing that? Like, you think is it political? He's trying to play with.
Well, it's interesting when you look at who's funding his campaign and all the endorsements he has. You know, it would be consistent. That's all I got to say. You know, but this is real though, because there is a ripple effect on the people who have been wrongfully convicted and who have been exonerated, and the ripple effect is it impacts their families, but it impacts our system of justice. Because it doesn't make any sense why we wouldn't hold people accountable. At a base minimum, we need to review their work. Let's take a look at what was done. If they have done something that they should not have done, if it rises to a crime, well, then they should be dealt with on that level.
Can I ask you
Yeah.
why? I guess in all of these crooked cop stories and all these stories that we discuss, right? In the David Terrell story, right, it's like, oh, he was trying to hit on so-and-so's mom. She didn't want to give him action, so he started picking on the kids. And then I go, but really? You just going to pick on, like, it doesn't, I can't, my brain doesn't work like that to really think like I would take handcuffs or putting someone in jail that lightly, that just because moms wasn't feeling me, I would then like start picking on, like, I don't get it.
But it's an abuse of power.
There you
bro.
go.
Right,
It's
but
just
I don't
a sheer
understand it.
abuse of power. This is the same person.
But then how does this individual get away with that? Like, how do you?
Well, there's obviously people protecting him.
Right.
Because remember, when he was on the cover of the newspaper, it's like, okay, so what does the NYPD do? Do they hold him accountable?
And
he's
then he
gonna open
finger
up,
points
yeah, then he's
everyone
gonna
else.
start pointing at everybody out. And do they want that? Probably not.
So we think a lot of this stuff goes on because people are covering for other people, and it's so deep and so rampant that if you were to go at this one incident or this one individual, it would.
Say this, right? It's the accountability. If you don't hold them accountable, it's like she was saying. The district attorney office has the opportunity to hold other district attorney's office, but you can't have them policing themselves. They're not going to do it. You know what I'm saying? They co-workers, they're friends. So if somebody's doing something wrong, they're gonna cover for them. Police are the same way. They got that code of silence. They're not gonna say something about another officer. The detective in my case is actually being honored.
That's true.
He disgraced the badge, but he's being honored next week or this week or something. He's being honored. You know, so you can't expect them to do anything to their own. We have to create some type of commission, like she said, of people outside of that. That's going to look at them and say, okay, I don't have no obligation to protect you. So if you do something wrong, I'm going to hold you accountable.
So this is one of the things. What I've always found is that when people have access to an opportunity, and they're not good people, they will exercise their access and opportunity to do what they want to do. And I'm not saying all cops are bad, because I know a lot of members of the New York City Police Department and law enforcement are fantastic. But you know what? All it takes is one. And you know, with that in mind, and when I talk about building the trust with the community and the district attorney's office, you know what I plan on doing. Unfortunately, if there is a shooting where a cop shoots an unarmed person, kills an unarmed person, I'm going to go. Now, those cases can go to the Attorney General. They can. They don't always take those cases. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to petition the court and ask for a special prosecutor to be appointed. Because just like what Chewbacca just said, is that you can't really investigate and police your own. No. And the problem is there is an appearance then of impropriety, because the community is just not buying it. They're like, wait a minute now. You know, you all work together. You know, and now you're going to investigate.
Hang out together,
right.
y'all vacation together, y'all be at the cookouts.
Exactly.
We see you.
Right. Or we see you in the courtroom. And you know how hard that is and how terrible it is? You have mothers in the courtroom and their sons or daughters are facing charges, and all of a sudden they see everybody giving high five, how you doing, how was last night, you know, and so people start feeling some kind of way, and they feel that way because they feel like their justice doesn't matter. But in order to ensure that we have trust in the community, I will request a special prosecutor, because I remember when I was back in the day, when I was coming up in the office and I was at these precincts, you know, I would respond to a precinct if there was a shooting. You know, that was a part of the job that we did. And it would be one thing. You'd greet it one way when it's a civilian against civilian. But let me tell you something. If it's a member of law enforcement, and when you walk into that precinct, it's chilly. And it's very different. And that's the truth. Now, people don't want to talk about that. I don't know why they don't, but that is real. And in order to address that, even for the sake of the officer, as well as the community, you want to have an unbiased investigation. You want a fair investigation. In order to do that, you can't be connected to any of them.
Ama Jamo's her name. September 12th.
September 12th. My name is
week
Ama.
from today.
Yeah. My name is Ama, A-M-A, and because my last name is different, Dwimoh, it's spelled D-W-I-M-O-H, because my dad was from Ghana, West Africa. This is what the borough president always says. He says, you know what, Ama, you got to tell folks what your name really is all about. So this is what he says. He said that, you know, we may have elected Obama, but now we have Ama. So everybody.
She got bars too.
There we
Brooklyn, bars.
Okay, that's all I'm saying now. Remember Ama, September 12th, because it matters. Justice matters to each and every one of us.
Thank you, Ama. Good luck.
Thank you so much. God bless you guys. Thank you. Thank you.